In the peak of the muscle car era, it wasn't just horsepower that ruled the streets, it was identity. And at the heart of GM's thunderous legacy stood one engine, the 454 Big Block, a monstrous powerhouse that didn't just power cars, it defined them. It was more than metal and fuel. It was a statement, a symbol, a legend. For years, this juggernaut carried GM through the golden age of American performance. To many, it was the reason GM sat at the top. Loyalists worshipped it, rivals feared it, and the streets, they never forgot its roar. But even legends can bleed, and what happened next, no one expected. Because taking down an engine like the 454 isn't just a business decision. It's a blow to the very soul of the muscle car world. So what really happened? Why did GM kill its most iconic engine? Let's dig into the fall of a giant. Well, it started off like any other story. Ambition, innovation, competition. But this was not just any other story, and soon the entire world would know it. The influence of this monster extended into pop culture beyond automobile culture. This engine was the original Fast and Furious series for the world. People to this day remember the number 454 as something super powerful. But what was it that made this engine so glorious? The glory of the 454 was no accident. By the late 1960s, the automobile market, mainly in North America, was raging with innovation and competition. The brands were in a full-out war to produce and put out the most powerful engines in the market. The times were different. Times were simpler. No one knew what electric cars were. There were no Cybertrucks, and horsepower was king. American muscle cars were peaking across the market, and everyone wanted in on it. Ford and Chrysler were giving quite a tough time to GM, and the people at GM were becoming more and more sure each day that something had to change. The brand was not suffering, but that wasn't enough. The brand wanted more. It wanted more power. It wanted more glory. At the time, GM had a thing already going on with the Mark IV Big Block family, and the brand was now looking to take it a step ahead. Beasts like 396 and 427 of the same family were already well received in the market, but the 454 was going to be something much more. But since money has always been an issue, the brand wanted to make the most of what they had. Using architecture similar to the engines that preceded the 454 Big Block allowed the company to use toolings, some parts, and designs across engines. This wise decision helped the brand excel further without completely breaking the bank. But this was not the only reason. The post-war economy was booming, fuel was cheap, and the demand for power among the customers was only increasing. People wanted high-performance monsters, and they were willing to pay for it. The bigger was better at the time, and GM capitalized on the mindset to perfection. GM was also looking to go further into the league of trucks and towing as well. This engine was the best option for the company. A beast that would not only provide insanely high performance in average road cars, but would also be perfect for trucks and towing. The engine went on to become the go-to engine for motorhomes, dualies, and work trucks. This era went on to be known as the golden age of American muscle. The reason why this is the era in which most purist vehicles thrived was that almost everyone was realizing that the muscle vehicles were not going to be around for very long. The governing bodies were slapping on regulations like it was no one's business, and issues like emissions, safety, and fuel economy were becoming more and more relevant, along with the increasing regulations. GM had to be quick. Well, to be fair, everyone was racing to get one final strike before the party was over forever. It was just a matter of who got there first. The idea was already there, but the brand still had to build the beast it had imagined so well. Under Chevrolet, which was under GM at the time, GM started working on the beast that was meant for ages. Since the engine was meant to go insane on the roads, the engineers went for a cast iron block. A cast iron block was quite an obvious choice for the era, but that does not mean it was just for the sake of convenience. The cast iron had the strength needed to withstand the high internal pressures that would build up within the engines. And as cast iron was already well received for blocks among the people, it just made sense. The displacement of the beast was 545 inches, which gave the engine its iconic name. 545 meant roughly a 7.6-liter engine. This massive displacement of the engine provided the vehicle it powered with excellent throttle response and instant power delivery. And the enormous low-end torque it could produce was just perfect for both performance and heavy-duty towing. The cast iron cylinder heads used oval or rectangular ports. The rectangular ports were amazing for improved airflow, which helped the engine achieve more complete combustion. The oval ports were more focused on low-end torque for trucks and street use. However, later on, some crate versions also came with aluminum cylinder heads. The valve train used on the 454 was a traditional choice. Instead of opting for OHC, which was a relatively new option, GM went with the simplistic, old-school, and convenient OHV design. This meant the cylinders had overhead valves, 2 per cylinder, with a classic pushrod design. This design was simple and considered quite reliable. The best part was that working on it was not that difficult if you knew what you were doing. The variations were not limited only to cylinder heads. The fuel delivery systems of these engines also varied throughout the years. The first performance vehicles powered by this beast, like LS5 or LS6, were using Holley 4-barrel carburetors, which were easy to tune and would deliver plenty of fuel in an instant to provide pure performance. But the later versions were equipped with either throttle body injection, TBI, or multi-port fuel injection, MPFI. These came along later, but they were everything the former system lacked. These systems provided better fuel economy, better cold starts, and more controlled emissions. Crankshafts also came in variations depending on the vehicle. Some engines used forged steel as the material for better durability under high RPM and torque, while others used the inferior, cast steel versions. Initially, these engines would produce a gross horsepower of 450, specifically for the Star Child LS6. It went lower in trucks. But what could not be denied in any circumstances was the fact that these engines were something quite special. The torque often exceeded the 500-pound mark. This engine was doing wonders on the roads, in terms of performance, towing, and even on big vehicles. One may wonder, how can an engine so excellent be put down just like that? Well, it wasn't just like that. A lot went on that many don't even know about. The reasons that led to the ultimate takedown of 454 big block engines. For starters, the emission controls were out to get all performance vehicles. It may not have been directly, but the engines had to be watered down, which was obviously bad for performance. However, the alternative would have been bad for Earth in general. By the mid-70s, EPA emissions standards were put into effect in the USA. These new standards forced manufacturers to reduce the size of their engines, and engines that were extremely large, like the 454, suffered the most due to it. The fuel economy was another major issue of the 70s, as the fuel prices began to rise in 1973. People could no longer afford fuel-gulping engines. The 454 big block could barely hit the 10 miles per gallon mark. This began shaving off the popularity of this engine and forced the common people to move to more economical options. The market conditions were beginning to look worse than they ever had before the purist fanatics. High-performance engines were going out of the market very quickly. Multiple factors came into play to make the conditions so bad. The demand for high-displacement vehicles had dropped very quickly, and people were now buying cars that were lighter, more efficient, and easier to take care of. The engine didn't really have to be killed off, but it was starting to become a liability for the brand. A sick dog, some may say. Noticing the fall in demand, manufacturers began shifting from high-performance, insane engines to modern fuel injection, turbocharging, and lighter engines. The appeal of big blocks was gone. GM didn't want to be left behind. The brand quickly moved on to the new LS engine series, which was more suitable for the new market conditions. These were lighter, these were more efficient, and they were just what the people wanted. The 454 blocks were replaced on the roads by newer models, but the legacy the mighty engine left behind could never be matched. The engine became the highest peak of the muscle car era, and while it dominated the roads at a time, it still helps newer engineers to think more creatively and to think bigger, like actually bigger. The 454 big block was extremely influential across segments. Walking down a street, you still might see someone wearing a t-shirt that says 454. In 1996, GM finally pulled the plug on the legendary 454 big block engines. However, the engines were still not fully dead. These beasts were still lurking around as crate engines, reminding the people of what peak performance looked like before it had to die at the hands of global circumstances. The market went on to become something no one could have imagined at the time when 454 engines were roaring on the streets. But those roars will never truly be forgotten. For more stories like these, subscribe to our channel. Let us know your thoughts on this legendary powerhouse in the comments below. See you soon.